Are you ready to embody your divine nature? Discover the 10 keys to an ecstatic, fulfilling life. In my new book, My Ecstatic Rebirth, the 10 keys to unleash your power, pleasure, and purpose, you can discover the space to get in touch with your divinity. This book exists to make clarity more accessible and to jumpstart your transformational journey. By following the 10 keys to unleash your power, pleasure, and purpose, you'll be opening the door to a fulfilling, expansive life, and you will begin to start creating your own heaven on earth. Discover how to deprogram yourself from the conditioning that keeps you trapped in fear, shame, and guilt about your sexuality, power, and pleasure. Allow your limitations to fall off and for you to reveal the true radiance of your own soul. You are the one you are seeking. Head over to heartinitiation.com/book to get the book for free for a limited time. The book is also available on Audible and Amazon and other bookstores at a cost, but you can go to heartinitiation.com/book to get the book for free now. Blessings, and thank you for listening to this podcast. Today we've got sex educator Jack Jones on the line in Baltimore, USA. So how are you doing today, Jack?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Let's start with this positive consent, because growing up we never really told how to positively consent with someone. Certainly I didn't get the sex education in school, and even as adults we don't really do it until we start learning how to consciously use our mind and our body in a loving and healthy way. So what is the kind of things you teach around positive consent?
Well, I usually start with talking about the difference between sex and rape, which is simply the presence of consent. In the States for a while, we were going through a place where we were talking about consent is sexy, and that's great. And I think it was a movement that we needed to get through to get to the place where we're like, without consent, it's a crime, it's a felony. And so we need to really be focusing on ways to make sure that we're engaging with each other that are positive and sexy and not criminal. And so one of the ways that I like to talk about that is sometimes when people talk about affirmative consent, it gets real clunky. People will be like, ask every time you touch someone or you're moving into a different kind of thing, ask for permission. And what people hear from that, and the feedback that I get from a lot of the folks that we work with, is what they hear is that they're supposed to be like, can I touch your breast? Can I touch your clitoris? Can I give you a blowjob? And that doesn't sound fun, right? Mm-hmm. But what it can be is something along the lines of like, baby, I really, really want to lick your nipple right now. It would make me really happy. How does that feel to you? And that feels really different. It's more like dirty talk than some sort of clunky legal negotiation. And so we talk about ways to really think about doing that. One of the ways, though, that is important to make that work is both people being sober, or at least soberish, in order to be able to have that conversation. And the other thing is then if you're having those kinds of conversations and really engaging with people, you're going to have better sex because you're able to ask for what you want. You're able to, if someone's like, hey, baby, I really want to lick your nipple right now, you can be like, oh my God, I'm so glad you want to, but really, could you instead lick my neck? And then you're not having to be like, oh, stop that. I don't like that right now. Can you do this other thing? You can redirect somebody before you even get there.
So what about first time sex with someone new, rather than perhaps you would use the words, hey baby, or I want to lick your nipple right now, is not something you're probably going to say to someone at the end of a date, or you're like, I don't know, you're back at their house. You feel like something's going to happen. You're in a right setting that something's going to happen or might potentially happen. How do you recommend that people express themselves at this moment before anything else has ever started?
I know that what I should say is you should ask somebody before you kiss them, and I don't think you always do that. I think that sometimes that could be clunky. But you do need to listen to them. If you go in for a kiss and somebody dodges you, then don't proceed. However, once the clothes start to come off, or if there's any sort of like touching that's starting to move towards clothes coming off, that is absolutely a time where you can start to be like, I really want to take your shirt off. And that doesn't, and I don't care if you don't even know that person's name, like that can be really appropriate, and that can feel really hot.
Mm-hmm. And then you're not asking a question like, how do you feel about that?
Right. It doesn't have to be. It can be like, I really want to take your shirt off, and then wait for a response. Mm-hmm. Because, and that's the key part too, is waiting for the response, right? Because part of affirmative consent is about the presence of yes rather than the absence of no. So if you say to somebody, I really want to take your shirt off, and then you rip their shirt off, then without the person interacting with you, and people can interact and respond to questions or requests that are related to consent without necessarily it having to be a verbal yes. And so if someone's like, I really want to take your shirt off, and the person responds by ripping their shirt off, their own shirt off, well, that's pretty clear, right? And yes, in an ideal world, we would always have a verbal yes. And also sometimes things get a little bit messy when we're having sex with people.
Yeah. And what about for the person who probably going to be female in the receiving end of it in terms of boundaries, knowing perhaps that person doesn't want something to happen? How would you manage that situation, or tell them how to say no in that situation?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd challenge you on putting a gender on that.
Okay.
And I do think that there's lots of times, one of the things that we do sometimes to people who we perceive as masculine is assume that they have fewer boundaries around their sex or sexuality than people that we perceive as feminine. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's always true. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that there are 100% times where people of any gender get in situations where their boundaries are being pushed in a way that is not acceptable. And so one of the things that I encourage people to do if they're in a situation where they are finding that someone's asking them for something that they don't want to do is to give that person the gift of a no. Because assuming that other person in the room with them is not a predator, right? Which most people aren't. Most people aren't criminals, and they don't actually want you to do something that you don't want to do. It might be that they really want to receive a sensation, and they really honestly don't care who gives them that sensation right in that moment. But tomorrow they would care if they knew that you did something that you didn't want to do. So remembering that telling that person no is actually just as much of a gift as telling them yes, even if they don't feel like it right then. Because imagine if you're somebody who actually cares about humans, right? It doesn't even have to be about that specific human that you're with. You're somebody who doesn't want to be a rapist, right? And if you're in a situation where you're ignoring somebody's signals, and that person is unable to give you the gift of a no, you might end up realizing later that you did something really terrible to another human being, and then you have to live with that. So if it's possible for somebody to give a gift of a no, then that's a really powerful and positive thing that you're giving to somebody. Now, granted, there are plenty of situations where people are in a room with a predator and they can say no as much as they want and it's not going to matter, right? And that's not the situations that I'm talking about right now.
I completely agree with what you're saying in terms of getting that full 100% yes, and intuitively knowing that they even if they can't verbally say yes, let's do it, then, you know, to have at least would you recommend a certain number of indicators of a yes before going any further?
Absolutely. And if you are the slightest bit unsure about whether or not somebody is into what's going on, then it's really appropriate to stop and be like, hey, I'm not sure this is what you want to do. Do you want to proceed? That's where you absolutely need to get a verbal yes.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any indication, like if someone goes stiff, right? If someone's not giving you eye contact, if someone's not responding, then that is 100% a time where you need to be like, hold on, wait a minute. Did I do something wrong? Are you okay? Because many, many people carry sexual trauma with them. And disassociating and checking out is not an uncommon response to sexual trauma. And so it's really important that everybody remember that, especially if the person that you're with is someone you don't know well. And if someone starts to check out, you need to back off. And another thing that I encourage people to practice is saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And also receiving no. If I'm working with a group, we'll often do an exercise. This exercise is not my idea. I got it from the Cuddle Party folks, and the Cuddle Party folks, I think, may have gotten it from someone as well. And it's where you practice an exercise where you sit with another person and the person offers you things, right? And not sexual things, but they offer you things that everybody wants. Like, would you like ice cream? Would you like a puppy? Would you like to go to see your favorite musician perform? And every time they ask you, you say no.
Yeah, I've done that one, yeah.
Right. And it's super helpful to practice, because one of the things that you learn as the person who's doing the exercise is that the person in front of you doesn't break from you saying no to them. And one of the things that the person who's receiving the no's learns is that it's totally, you can offer somebody something amazing and maybe they don't want it right now. And that's fine. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't have anything to do with you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could make the best chocolate cheesecake in the world, and I make a hell of a good chocolate cheesecake. And 8 out of 10 people might not want to eat it. Right? Because, I don't know, they're lactose intolerant, they don't like cheesecake, they're against chocolate, they're diabetic, any of those things, and it wouldn't have anything to do with the quality of my cheesecake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree. And I remember I was back to that saying no question. I think we did it where we said no, and then we also said yes. So we had a role play in terms of saying yes and no. And the woman I was with was pretty crazy. She was asking me questions like, "Will you be a dog and let me put a collar on you and lead you around the park?" And I'm like, "No." "Will you bark like a dog for me?" "No." "Will you piss on the tree like a dog?" That was her third question. So I don't know. She had a bit of a weird obsession with turning a man into a dog, but
hey, it's a thing people like to do.
Yeah. It's pretty common, perhaps. I do recommend, to people to get used to saying yes and no, and these things, and my following question to what we've talked about so far would be, ideally, I've got my own opinions, but I'll ask yourself first.
Sure.
What should positive sex look like? At a bare minimum, I'll just say on my part, like eye contact, presence, breathing together. Like it should feel good in your heart, like as a yes, and in your body and your soul. If you're feeling into those different parts of yourself, then all of those things should be aligned, and it should be like a full yes, like like you say about cake or whatever, you like fully
right.
want that cake, and it feels like you feel present with it. What other things for you would you say that positive sex should feel like every time?
I think that sex positive sex should be something that is in line with your ethics and values, whatever those are, whatever those look like. Some sex that you can feel good about the next day. Sex that is safer in terms of your physical risk and that's risk aware in terms of your physical risk. And so, are you somebody, do you guys have PrEP in Europe?
Like preschool?
No, PrEP, it might be called something different. It's when somebody takes a medication called Truvada, they take it every day in order to prevent HIV.
I don't know what the name of it is here.
Yeah. It's a newer method of prevention of HIV, and it's highly effective. So whatever it is that you need to do in order to protect yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually in order to be able to be engaged in the sex and sexuality. The other thing that I think that's important to positive sex is understanding that A, you don't have to want sex all the time. B, it doesn't have to be the same kind of sex all the time. Every time you have sex, it doesn't have to be awesome. Sometimes you try something new and it sucks and you're like, wow, I don't want to do this anymore. And you stop, and that's a win, right? Like you tried something, you didn't like it, you were able to communicate that you didn't like it, and you stopped. You learned something. Sex positive sex is not, to me, about having amazing sex all of the time. It's about having sex that is risk aware, that is communication based, that's pleasure focused, and where you're able to communicate about what you want and need and learn something from it.
Yeah, all very, very good points. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do and how long you've been doing it?
Sure. I've been working in reproductive health care and sex ed since 1994. And about 10 years ago, I had the privilege to open Sugar, which is a sex positive, education focused sex toy store here in Baltimore. And we're also online at sugartheshop.com. We offer education and classes here. We have some of the most incredible customers that I could ever dream of, and I get to work with amazing coworkers. It's really a privilege to be able to talk to people about sex and be able to talk to folks about sex from a really sex positive perspective. I used to work in healthcare, and so when I was talking to people about sex, I was often coming at it from a disease-based model, right? You've got somebody in front of you, they have chlamydia, you got to talk about it, and this way, we're able to do the same work, but talk about it from a pleasure-based model. Like, here, put this in your butt. It's completely safe, and it's going to bring you pleasure, and it's not going to expose you to any sexually transmitted infections. And being able to provide people with access to the information they need in order to fully express their sexuality, however they define it, and whatever that looks like, is something that brings me joy every single day.
Awesome. And where can people find out more about what you do and your shop?
Sure. You can find us online at sugartheshop.com. And then I'm on Twitter and the Instagram as Sugar Jack. That's Sugar JACQ.
Great.